You have been chosen. Ah, sweet.
Bruh. This is a real human being! What a fucking legend!
So, not too long ago, the window for playing the Nioh 2 alpha demo closed, and I got the prestigious honor of playing it after being sent a code for some unknown reason, probably being a big mistake someone made purely on accident. It had been a while since I'd played the original Nioh, and so I was kind of excited to see what this new offering could possibly bring to the table with a new identity and revamped combat system, and so I'd loaded into it, played it for a couple of hours, and met with a great and resounding I'll get this one out of the way quickly, for the sake of convenience, so people don't have to painstakingly sit through the rest of this video for a fancy pants verdict. Nioh 2 is just more Nioh. I'm not really too sure how else to explain it, but that's the broadest possible way I can put it. If you like the first Nioh, then you'll like the second, and if you didn't like the first Nioh, then you're certainly not going to like this one, so give it a miss. So, you're probably wondering why, right? Nioh 2 being Nioh doesn't exactly mean much, and wouldn't that be a good thing? Well,
let's take a look.
Nioh 2 is a simple case of being yet another iteration of its previous counterpart. Now, it's worth noting that this is just the alpha version, so the game could be drastically different from the current build that we see now, and things could be changed based on the feedback the studio behind it received in this time frame. With that being said, and with me being as optimistic as I am, I wouldn't necessarily hold them to that, as the game could be changed. But considering the formula of things, plus the amount of detail already put into the game, it's highly unlikely any huge overhauls would be carried out to the overall experience. I mentioned earlier how the email I showed for the sake of hyperbole connoted that the combat system had been revamped, which essentially alludes to there being a new combat system in place. I, admittedly, disliked the combat system in the previous title, with the multiple stances on top of the different weapon categories, and onmyoji and ninjutsu, and so on and so forth. It just meant that there was a lot going on, and so I felt that certain areas of it weren't exactly as developed as they could be, thus making the whole thing feel like a bit of a mess. And I'm sorry to say, but the revamped combat system is a complete lie. It's exactly the same, with no changes. The only difference being some slight tweaks to the Guardian spirits you receive, and a couple more things on the UI, and that's about it. Everything functions identical to Nioh 1, including stances and what each stance does. Armor works the same, weapons work the same, movesets are the same, and you still have to turn on the numbers next to your health and stamina meters in the option menu. It still isn't a default thing. Come on! The only additional thing to do with weapons in this instance is that some weapons can occasionally be yokai weapons or blessed weapons, which inflict status ailments accordingly, and after a certain amount of usage, just have a brief window where they deal more damage and inflict more of their accompanying status ailment. As far as I could tell as well, the dual swords have been replaced from Nioh 1 with dual hatchets instead for some bizarre reason, but they're actually kind of busted, so don't feel too bad if you were the person who enjoyed dual swords, as this should be more than enough compensation for that. The other slightly notable thing about the combat would be the changes to one of the signature things of Nioh's combat in the first game, Living Weapon. Living Weapon has been changed instead to Yokai Shift, which functions exactly the same as Living Weapon, except rather than having your character just glow and have shiny weapons, you now transform into a yokai of some sort with a new moveset. But aside from that, it is literally the same thing, so don't get too excited about it. The damage you take still drains the meter, and the meter can be kept up with Amrita, and so on and so forth. Woo. Guardian spirits also come with attunement slots now, meaning you can attach the brand new soul cores you find from enemies in the overworld, allowing you to do some fancy flashy move at the cost of some new gauge under your stamina or key gauge. Most of them aren't really too useful, and there are some that do serve a bit more of a purpose, such as the Kappa Soul Core, which gives you a Kappa-like shell protecting you from damage from behind. The game still follows the same rules with the hub world and mission-based story progression alongside Twilight missions, which are just harder versions of already existing missions. Also, I'd like to point out that it said that there were free missions in this alpha, and I don't see free missions, considering one of them is just the Twilight version of the first mission you do. Why must you continue to lie to me, Nioh?
Oh god, it's happening again!
With it being a tiny portion of the finished product, I can't really comment on the new enemy types, aside from a few notable larger yokai such as the Ippon Datara, and my ex-girlfriend, and Sword Art Online, an actually decent looking boss that's probably going to be like Onryoki from the previous game where they start to put him in every room in the later parts of the game and he eventually becomes a complete pushover. And snake jokes. Enemy tracking is still an issue and the AI can be a bit special sometimes, so not much has changed there. Magic is still completely broken, even more so now with the addition of actually useful lifesteal talismans, meaning you can literally just wail away at a boss and mash square until you win. And as soon as I discovered how effective magic was, my playthrough went from insurmountable difficulty to breezing through missions without even trying. On the subject of difficulty, Nioh is a franchise that's supposed to be coupled with the Souls-like or Diablo-like games, where its difficulty is unrelenting and doesn't treat its players lightly. One small mistake can mean certain death. And where I'm a fan of difficult video games, considering the Toho series is my favorite game franchise, I always had an apparent issue when it comes down to Nioh's difficulty. It wasn't a difficult game. It was an unfair game. Most of the game's challenge doesn't come from intricate level design, smart enemy placement, or the aspect of overcoming an obstacle by means of learning patterns and opening for counterattack, but came from a false idea of trial and error. It's hard to summarize this point and keep it concise for the sake of this video, as I could make a whole video on this topic alone, and where it's more of a subjective matter, I feel, after playing the previous game enough, that I'm confident in what I say regarding this. To attempt to summarize it, Nioh doesn't challenge the player, creating a scenario where they have to react and be on their toes, but it instead artificially inflates the difficulty through aspects outside of the player's control, and unadaptable situations whereby the player has to be overly methodical with even the simplest task. Hopefully that makes some kind of sense, probably not, oh well. But let me know what you think. There's a reason why I say this, because we're basically seeing the same thing, with the game placing these walls of difficulty in front of the player, throwing you under the bus and making the whole process of overcoming the challenge feel more like a chore than any actual sense of progression, some of which end up being the equivalent of the game having you attempt to impress Squidward's art critic in that one episode of SpongeBob.
How about this one? I call it bold and brash. More like belongs in the trash!
Lastly, they've kinda made the co-op a little bit fancier as well. Co-op was something I never really explored too much in Nioh, but I definitely noticed a spike in the experience and gold gained through doing it the few times I did. Which begs the question why you would ever play the game solo anyway. Similar to the last game, there's the usual online shenanigans whereby you can join other players by searching for missions where players are requesting help. But there's also something new in place. Newly added to the game, somewhat similar to Dark Souls' White Sign Soapstone, are these neat little jaspers that you can place anywhere throughout the level that you're currently on, appearing just like the red graves where players died previously, except these ones are blue. How very spooky! Rather than being summoned to another player's world, however, it instead summons a helpful AI version of your current character to assist the other player, which attempts to replicate your playstyle, and if your phantom ends up successfully helping another player by completing the mission, you're rewarded with things. I'm not actually too sure, I wasn't paying attention when I got rewarded. Sorry. There's a little method I found for basically getting help whenever you want it with the help of these spirits. Basically, you can summon them wherever you find a blue grave, and they'll fight the enemies for you at the cost of a couple of Ochako cups. The thing is, revenants, enemies, spirits of deceased players, Also drop a couple of these cups whenever you kill one, and since there'll be plenty of potential revenants scattered throughout the level, you can simply get your helper to gank the revenant with you, farm some Ochako cups, and rinse and repeat, therefore never running out of them. At least that's the method I found that works. The only downside is summoning the help also cuts your Amrita game by quite a bit, but if you want to farm revenants for armor or weapons, I'd say it's more than worth it to exploit this kind of thing. And that about does it. There is not really much else to say in regards to the rest of the alpha that hasn't been covered, but considering Nioh 2 is just more of Nioh 1, I'm probably going to have to give this game a bit of a miss. Due to the nature of the game and its current state, it just feels like nothing more than a simple expansion to the prior title, so we'll have to wait until the full story comes out, and what that offers us in comparison to the horrible story of the first game. I don't entirely dislike Nioh, but I can say it's one of the only times I've ever bought DLC for a game and then never finished it, so take from that what you will as some kind of verdict. Yeah, 4 out of 10, I don't know. Go watch my other content, it's better than this garbage. Bye.